The phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen, just 2 words, "Good luck." My ex's text, just those cold words. The tiny clothing store smelled faintly of fabric and fresh paint, customers chatting softly around me. I folded a shirt slowly as if I hadn't just been dumped through a message. My hands didn't shake. I didn't panic. Instead, I whispered, "That's it." Around me, the day hummed on, unaware of the quiet storm I was about to weather. By the way, before we dive in, tell me in the comments, ever seen someone get the revenge they really deserved? I read all of them. Hey, while you're here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's continue. My name's Emma. I was 32 then, running that little clothing store I'd opened a year before. It was barely enough to cover rent and bills, but it was mine, a small dream stitched together from sweat and late nights. Before the text came, life felt uncertain, sure, but steady in its own messy way. My ex, Ryan, had grown distant, though I told myself it was just stress from his job. But there were moments, tiny cracks I could no longer ignore. At dinner, he'd barely meet my eyes, scrolling on his phone instead of asking about my day. Once, I found a receipt for a dinner I wasn't part of his name with someone else's, but I shrugged it off, trying not to jump to conclusions. Then there was the way his tone shifted when I asked about weekends, how his laughter sounded forced during our last few conversations. Still, I held on to hope. After that text, everything felt heavier, but I didn't crumble. Instead, I started paying attention to the little things. The late-night calls he quickly ended when I walked in, the unexplained absences, the silence that grew between us like a thick fog. I found myself scribbling notes in the margins of my notebook while folding shirts, dates, odd behaviors, things that didn't sit right. More than once, I caught myself replaying conversations, trying to pinpoint when the warmth faded. Was it the silence, the lack of eye contact, or was I fooling myself, wishing for what wasn't there? At night, I'd stare at the tiny apartment walls, feeling the weight of a future I wasn't sure I'd have anymore. The store became my refuge. Each customer, each sale, each carefully arranged rack was a small victory, a reminder that I had something solid to hold on to. I didn't tell anyone about the text, not friends, not family. They had enough of their own worries. Instead, I built quiet routines, checking inventory early, brainstorming new designs, reaching out to local suppliers. I found strength in the small actions, setting goals for the shop's growth, teaching myself bookkeeping, researching online how others had made it on their own. The nights were long, the work exhausting, but slowly those moments of preparation grounded me. It was like I was weaving a new fabric for my life, one thread at a time. Sometimes, when I closed the store late, I'd stand on the tiny balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights. The world was still moving, indifferent to my pain, but in that movement I found a strange comfort. If everything could keep going, so could I. One evening I called my closest friend Mia, who ran a cafe down the street. Her voice was warm, a lifeline in the quiet. "You okay?" she asked gently. "I will be," I said, surprising even myself with the calmness in my voice. "Just figuring things out." She didn't press, just listened. Sometimes that's all you need. Behind the scenes, I was already planning, not revenge. Not confrontation, just a future that didn't depend on him. It wasn't about forgetting what happened, but about taking control of the parts I could shape. The shop was my start, and slowly I was building a foundation beneath the cracks. The days blurred together, mornings of inventory and emails, afternoons of customer chats and quiet hopes, evenings of sketches and dreams scribbled in my notebook. With every small step, I felt less like a woman abandoned and more like someone who could shape her own story, no matter what the past said. I didn't know then how far I'd come, but something inside told me this was just the beginning. The day Ryan's text arrived felt like a sharp crack in an otherwise ordinary morning. But the real shock came a few weeks later, in a way I hadn't expected. I was sorting through new stock, the soft hum of the store's old radio filling the small space, when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ryan's sister, someone I hadn't heard from in months. The words were simple but struck me cold. "Ryan's left for good, don't wait." That night I sat on the worn-out couch in my apartment, the message glowing on my screen like a warning light. I'd known deep down, but hearing it so plainly was different. No goodbyes, no discussions, no chance to make sense of anything, just an abrupt end. I thought about the life we'd shared, the small rituals, the shared jokes, the quiet evenings I now realized had felt hollow. I remembered the last time he'd come by the store, the way he barely looked at me, distracted and distant. "I don't think this is working," he'd said without emotion, as if he were reading a script. and now that script was over. But I didn't break. Not then, not ever. Instead, I folded a shirt and slipped it onto the rack, taking in the quiet around me. The few customers browsing looked up, sensing something in my stillness, but I smiled softly. "Everything's fine," I said, more to myself than to them. The truth was, I'd been preparing for this moment quietly, gathering my strength like armor. It wasn't a surprise, exactly, just the final confirmation of what I'd felt creeping in for months. I spent that evening going over the small details: bank statements, bills, the rent due next week. I had just over $1,000 left to my name, a tiny apartment with a creaky heater, and a store that barely made enough to keep the lights on. But I also had something he didn't: resolve. The next morning, I locked the door behind the last customer and pulled out my notebook. I wrote down everything: dates, events, conversations. I wasn't angry, there was no point in that, but I was clear. This was not the end of my story. A week later, I ran into Mia at her cafe. Her smile faltered when she saw the quiet in my eyes. "You're holding up better than I thought," she said, handing me a cup of tea. "I have to," I replied, letting the warmth soak in. I'm not waiting for him to decide my worth. That day, I made a small decision that felt huge. No more waiting, no more silence. I told a few close friends about what happened, not to seek sympathy, but to anchor myself in their support. Their reactions were a mix of shock and quiet admiration. "He's an idiot," Mia said bluntly. "Yeah," I agreed, "but I'm done being defined by what he did." The store became my world. Each day was a balancing act, serving customers, ordering new stock, learning about business through podcasts and blogs. The pain was there, sure, but it was a quiet companion now, not a roaring storm. Then, one afternoon, as I rearranged a rack of summer dresses, Ryan walked in. I froze. He looked different, older somehow, a little worn around the edges. His eyes scanned the small store, landing on me with a flicker of something I couldn't place. "Emma," he said, voice low, "can we talk?" I folded the dress slowly, placing it back on the rack without looking up. "I don't think there's anything left to say." He paused, then turned to leave, but the moment hung heavy in the air. The past and present collided quietly, but I knew then, more than ever, I was the one moving forward. Ryan's absence had forced me to build myself from nothing. And now, standing in the place I'd made my own, I was ready for whatever came next. After that day when Ryan walked into the store, I knew I couldn't afford to be caught off guard again. His visit stirred something in me, not anger exactly, but a quiet warning. If he thought he could just stroll back in and rewrite the story, he was mistaken. The next few weeks were a blur of focus and quiet determination. I spent hours at the store after closing, not just arranging clothes or updating my inventory, but digging deeper into the life I was building, and the one I was leaving behind. I started by going through every message, every email, every scrap of paper I'd saved over the years. I wasn't hunting for dirt on Ryan, I just needed clarity, a way to protect myself if he tried to interfere again. I scanned old texts, noting how the tone shifted gradually, from warmth to cold distance. I saved receipts and bank statements, tracing every penny we'd spent together and every bit of money I'd had to fend for myself. One afternoon, Mia stopped by with a box of pastries and a look that said she wanted to say something serious but wasn't sure how. "Emma, you're working too hard," she said gently, setting the box down on the counter. "You're strong, but even strong people need a break." I smiled, touched but resolute. "I know, but this isn't just about work. It's about making sure I never end up feeling powerless again." Mia nodded, then leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Do you think he'll come back?" I paused, maybe, but this time if he does, I want to be ready. The truth was, I didn't just want to survive, I wanted to thrive. That meant building a business so solid no one could shake it. So I began reaching out, quietly and carefully, to local designers and suppliers, asking about collaboration opportunities. I wanted to expand the store's offerings, bring in unique pieces that would make it stand out. I also started tracking expenses meticulously, setting small budgets and learning about Ryanetting online. I wasn't an expert, but I was eager to learn. Every little step felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. One evening, as I sat on the floor with my laptop, Mia called. "Hey, how's the empire building going?" she joked. I laughed softly. "Slow but steady." "Good, remember, you don't have to do this alone." Her words struck a chord, she was right. I had people who believed in me, who wanted to see me succeed. The day I got a message from an old friend, Lucas, felt like a small victory. Lucas worked in tech and knew a thing or two about business. He offered to help with building a website and setting up online sales, a step I'd been hesitant to take but knew was crucial. We met at the cafe, and as he talked about creating an online presence, I felt a spark of excitement. So this could really bring in customers from outside the neighborhood? I asked. Exactly, Lucas said. You're already great at what you do, this just helps more people find you. That night, I stayed up late drafting plans for the website, dreaming about reaching beyond the little store's walls. Meanwhile, I kept an eye on Ryan, careful but not obsessed. I wasn't about to let his shadow darken my door again. When a mutual acquaintance mentioned he was struggling financially, I felt a strange mix of emotions, sorrow maybe, but mostly a quiet satisfaction that I was moving forward. One afternoon, a message popped up on my phone. This time it wasn't from Ryan but from someone new, a local boutique owner interested in a collaboration. My heart lifted as I replied, I'd love to discuss this. Small wins like these piled up. The store started buzzing a little more. Customers lingered longer, asking about the new pieces, complimenting the layout. I hired a part-time assistant, a young woman named Sarah who had a passion for fashion and a bright energy that lifted the whole place. One busy afternoon, Sarah and I were restocking shelves when I caught myself smiling. Feels like things are finally turning, doesn't it? She said, stacking folded shirts. Yeah, I said quietly. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm the one in control. I thought about the past, Ryan's cold goodbye, the empty apartment, the uncertainty, and realized how far I'd come. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't just proof against him, it was proof of my resilience, my ability to build something real. That night, as I locked up, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ryan. I'm interested in investing in your business, it read. I stared at the words, my fingers hovering over the screen. A flicker of old memories passed through me, but I pushed it aside. I typed back simply, the business is mine. I'm not interested. I hit send and felt a calm settle over me. Whatever his intentions, I was ready. The evidence I'd quietly collected, the plans I'd carefully built, the support I'd gathered, they weren't just tools, they were my strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was rewriting the rules. The message from Ryan saying he wanted to invest wasn't just surprising, it was almost surreal. The man who had left me with nothing but a cold goodbye suddenly wanted a piece of what I was building. I didn't respond right away, instead I watched, waited, and prepared. A week later, he showed up at the store again. This time his eyes were sharper and his steps more deliberate. The bell over the door chimed as he entered, and for a moment the small shop felt like a battlefield. I looked up from the counter, folding a new shipment of scarves, and met his gaze with steady calm. Emma, he said, his voice measured. We need to talk. I smiled, but it wasn't warm. About what, Ryan? Your sudden interest in my business, or the way you left me 5 years ago? He hesitated, then said, Look, I made mistakes. I was wrong to walk away like that, but I see now you've built something impressive. I want to be part of it. I folded a scarf slowly, letting the silence stretch between us. You walked away with nothing but a text. I was left scrambling with $1,000 and a tiny apartment. Do you think you can just walk back in and buy your way into my life? He took a step closer, his tone sharpening. This isn't about the past, it's about the future. I can help you grow faster. I shook my head. No, I don't need your help. I've spent years building this from the ground up. Every sale, every late night, every small victory, it's mine, not yours. Ryan's jaw tightened. You don't know what you're turning down. I met his gaze evenly. I know exactly what I'm turning down, control, dependence, being second best. You left me once. I'm not making that mistake again. A few customers in the store glanced over, sensing the tension but unsure of what was said. Sarah, my assistant, gave me a subtle nod, her expression quietly supportive. Ryan looked around the shop, his eyes lingering on the racks filled with vibrant clothes, the little handwritten signs advertising new arrivals, the stack of invoices on the counter. This place, he said quietly, it's changed you. I smiled, this time with warmth but not for him. It's made me who I am. For a moment, the old man who had walked away was gone. This was a different person, someone who had faced loss, fear, and doubt and come out stronger. Ryan cleared his throat. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. I nodded once. I doubt that. He turned to leave, but before stepping out the door, he paused. You're lucky to have people like Mir and Lucas. I'm lucky to have myself, I said softly. The door chimed shut behind him and the store felt still again, filled with the quiet hum of possibility. That night I sat at my desk, going over the plans I'd been refining for months. Expansion ideas, Ryan strategies, new suppliers, all pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve on my own terms. I thought about the evidence I'd gathered, the notes, the receipts, the messages, and how they weren't just reminders of a painful past, but proof of my resilience and careful planning. In those moments, I realized something important. This confrontation wasn't just about Ryan. It was about me claiming my power, setting boundaries, and deciding the kind of life I wanted to lead. The following weeks were busy. Ryan's messages slowed, then stopped altogether. The store grew steadily, more customers, better sales, a rising reputation in the neighborhood. One afternoon, as I helped Sarah arrange a new display, my phone buzzed with a text from Mia. "Celebration soon, you're unstoppable." I smiled, texting back, "Definitely, thanks for being my rock." Life wasn't perfect. There were still late nights, financial worries, and moments of doubt. But with every step forward, I felt more in control, more confident. The past no longer held power over me. I was the CEO of my own story now. After Ryan's final visit, I threw myself even more into the business. It wasn't just about proving something to him anymore. It was about building a life that felt whole and true to me. Every morning, I arrived early at the store, unlocking the door with a sense of purpose I hadn't known before. I launched the website Lucas had helped me create. It wasn't flashy yet, but it brought new customers from beyond our neighborhood. Orders started trickling in, then grew steadily. I found myself juggling inventory, packing shipments, and answering emails late into the night, but there was a thrill in it, a quiet satisfaction. One afternoon, Mia stopped by during a slow spell. We sat on the worn-out couch in the back room, sharing stories over cups of strong tea. "You've come a long way," she said, eyes shining. "Remember when you told me you had just $1,000 and a dream?" I smiled, feeling the weight of those words. Feels like a lifetime ago. That day, a local fashion blogger featured the store in an online article. Suddenly, more people were walking in, curious and excited. Sales picked up. I hired Sarah full-time, trusting her to handle more of the daily rush. She was enthusiastic, always bringing fresh ideas. One busy Saturday, as the store buzzed with customers, a regular approached the counter. "Emma, I just wanted to say your shop feels different now, like it has a story behind every piece." I paused, touched. It does, it's been a journey. The truth was, every shirt folded, every order packed, every smile exchanged carried the weight of the past, but also the hope of the future. I stayed connected with Lucas and Mia, bouncing ideas off them, sharing wins and setbacks. Their support felt like an anchor, reminding me I wasn't alone. One evening, I sat by the window, reflecting on how much had changed. The tiny apartment I once dreaded now felt like a sanctuary. The store was no longer just a place of work, it was a symbol of resilience. Then came a message from an unexpected source, a small investor interested in partnering to expand the business further. I was cautious but curious. After a few meetings and careful consideration, I agreed. The investment meant new opportunities, a bigger space, more staff, better Ryan. When I shared the news with Mia and Sarah, their cheers and hugs filled the room. It wasn't just about money, it was about trust, growth, and the promise of something bigger. Amid the excitement, Ryan remained a distant memory. His name never came up anymore, and when it did, it was with a calm sense of closure. I no longer needed to prove anything to him or anyone. The store became a beacon in the community. I started hosting small events, fashion shows, workshops, and charity drives. People noticed, and slowly my name gained recognition beyond our little corner. One afternoon, a longtime customer said, "Emma, you're not just running a store. You're building a legacy." I felt a quiet pride swell inside me. That legacy was built on hard work, quiet strength, and the refusal to be defined by pain. The nights were still long and the work demanding, but the difference now was clear. I was steering the ship. The future was mine to shape. That winter, as I watched the city lights flicker through the window, I felt ready for whatever came next. Because this time I wasn't alone. I had a team, a community, and most importantly, myself. Months passed and life moved steadily forward. The store, once a small, fragile dream, was now growing into something solid and vibrant. The neighborhood buzzed about the new events I hosted, the fresh designs I brought in, and the way the shop felt alive with purpose. I wasn't just Emma, the woman who'd been left behind. I was Emma, the CEO, the business owner, the woman who had taken control. Meanwhile, Ryan's world seemed to unravel quietly but noticeably. Rumors started trickling through our circle. He'd lost his high-paying job, the company saying it was due to internal restructuring, but whispers hinted at something else. His reputation had taken a hit. Friends who once supported him distanced themselves. Even his sister, who had once messaged me with those blunt words about his leaving, began avoiding conversations when his name came up. One afternoon, Mia and I sat in her cafe, the aroma of fresh pastries filling the air. She lowered her voice, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "I heard Ryan's been struggling to keep steady work. It's like he's invisible now." I nodded, feeling no joy in his misfortune, just quiet confirmation that life moves on, sometimes unkindly for those who don't change. "That's what happens when you burn bridges," Mia said softly. "People remember it." Back at the store, the changes in my life were undeniable. I hired 2 more assistants, including Sarah's cousin, who brought a fresh energy and helped manage the increasing flow of customers. We expanded the space, adding a small section for local artists to showcase their work. The community embraced it. It became a hub, a place where people came not just to shop but to connect. One morning, I looked out at the bustling street, watching familiar faces pass by, some waving, others stopping in for a chat. I thought about the journey, how far I'd come from that tiny apartment with just $1,000 in my pocket. A text from Mia popped up. "You're a force, Emma, proud to know you." I smiled and replied, "Couldn't have done it without you." Even the financial side of things improved. The investment I'd cautiously accepted earlier paid off, allowing me to source better materials and offer competitive prices. Sales reports showed steady growth, and I found myself dreaming bigger, maybe even opening a second location someday. Yet it wasn't just business that had changed. I felt stronger, more confident. The sharp edges of past pain had softened into something like wisdom. I no longer feared being alone or starting over. I had proven to myself that I was enough. One afternoon, Sarah brought me a message from a customer who'd recently become a loyal supporter. "She said your story inspired her," Sarah said. "How you built this all yourself after everything." That hit me harder than I expected. Maybe my journey wasn't just about me. Maybe it was about showing others that strength could come from the quietest places, from the smallest beginnings. At home, I often found myself reflecting on the past, not to dwell but to learn. Ryan's absence had been painful, yes, but it had also been the catalyst for growth. I thought about what I wanted next, more than just survival, more than just success. I wanted fulfillment, joy, and connection. One evening, as I closed the store with Sarah, we talked about plans for the upcoming holiday season. "Imagine a holiday Ryanette here," she said, eyes sparkling. "Local vendors, music, food, people would love it." I nodded, feeling the excitement ripple through me. "Let's make it happen." Outside, the city lights twinkled like promises waiting to be fulfilled. Meanwhile, the last I heard about Ryan was that he'd moved to a different city, trying to start fresh. Part of me wished him well. Another part, well, it no longer mattered. His story and mine had diverged too much. I was no longer defined by what he did or didn't do. I was defined by who I chose to be. The community around me had shifted too. Friends and family who had quietly supported me all along now celebrated my successes openly. Mia's cafe often hosted our little planning meetings. Lucas helped me improve the website and even started advising on new business ideas. One afternoon, my younger sister stopped by, her eyes bright. "Emma, you've become a role model. I see it in how people look at you." I reached out, squeezing her hand. "It's not about being perfect," I said. "It's about never giving up." That became my mantra, one I shared quietly when people asked about my journey. As the year closed, I looked around the store during a small celebration with friends and customers. Laughter filled the space and the walls echoed with stories and dreams. I felt at peace. The past was no longer a chain but a foundation, strong enough to build upon but not heavy enough to hold me back. And as I looked forward, I knew the best was yet to come. The years since Ryan's final departure had changed everything. The tiny clothing store, once a fragile dream tucked into a quiet corner of the city, had grown into a vibrant hub of creativity and connection. But more than the business, it was I who had transformed into someone who no longer feared the past or the unknown future. On a crisp spring morning, I stood by the shop's window, watching familiar faces stroll by, some pausing to wave or smile. The scent of blooming flowers drifted in through the open door, mixing with the soft hum of conversations and laughter inside. It was a moment of calm, but also of quiet celebration, of resilience, of new beginnings. A message from Mia popped up on my phone. Can't wait to see what you do next. Proud of you. I smiled and typed back, me too. This is just the start. The shop had become more than a business. It was a community, a gathering place where stories like mine could unfold and inspire. Local artists displayed their work, small events filled the calendar, and customers weren't just customers anymore, they were friends, supporters, fellow dreamers. My team had grown too. Sarah was now my trusted manager, energetic and creative. Lucas continued advising me on technology and Ryanetting. And Mia, she was the steady heartbeat of support, always ready with encouragement or a listening ear. The apartment I once saw as a temporary shelter had become home, a cozy place filled with books, plants, and memories. My life felt full, balanced, and mine. One evening, as I closed the store, my phone buzzed with a video call from my niece, Lily. Her bright eyes sparkled on the screen as she asked, "Aunt Emma, how did you become so strong?" I paused, touched by her question. By learning that sometimes life pushes you to be brave even when you don't feel ready. She nodded thoughtfully. "Will you teach me?" "Always," I said with a smile. That conversation lingered with me. Strength wasn't about never falling, it was about rising every time, about believing in yourself even when the path ahead seems uncertain. Looking back, the memory of Ryan's cold goodbye felt like a distant shadow, important only because it had pushed me to find my own light. I had faced loss and disappointment, yes, but I had also discovered a well of courage I didn't know I had. The future was still wide open, full of possibilities. I had plans, a second store, a line of clothing inspired by local artisans, maybe even writing a book about this journey. But none of it felt urgent. I was no longer chasing someone else's version of success. I was crafting my own. As I locked the door one quiet night, I took a deep breath, savoring the cool air. The city was alive around me, full of stories waiting to be told. And I was ready to tell mine, not just through the clothes I sold, but through every choice I made, every step I took forward. Resilience, I realized, wasn't a destination but a way of living. A quiet strength beneath the noise, a steady hand guiding you through the storm. And as I walked toward the glow of the streetlights, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. This was my life now. Not defined by what was taken, but by all I had built with my own hands. And that was more than enough.